walked through the wilderness of this world. I lighted on a certain place and laid me down to sleep. And as I slept, I dreamed a dream. I dreamed that I saw a man with his face turned away from his own house, a book in his hand, and a great burden on his back. I looked and saw him open the book and read therein, and as he read, he wept and trembled, and not being able to contain himself, he broke out with a lamentable cry, saying, "What shall I do to be saved?" For he lived in the city of destruction, which he learnt from his book was doomed to be burned with fire from heaven, and which fearful overthrow both himself and his wife and their 4 sons, would miserably perish unless some way of escape could be found. So Christian, which is the man's name, so Christian went home to talk to his family. And they were really worried, but not because they believed that what he said was true, but because they thought some kind of madness had come to the man. And as it was drawing towards night, they hoped that sleep might settle him. With all haste, they put him to bed. But night was as troublesome as the day. Wherefore, instead of sleeping, he spent in sighs and tears. So when morning was come, and they asked him how he was, he told them, "Worse, worse." He also started talking to them again, but they began to lose patience. Sometimes they would deride him, sometimes they would chide him, and sometimes they would quite neglect him. So Christian went by himself into the fields, still reading his book and carrying his burden, and greatly distressed in his mind. He looked this way and that way, as if he would run. Yet he stood still because he couldn't tell which way to go. Then in the distance he saw a man approaching. The man's name was Evangelist. And he asked Christian, "What are you weeping for?" "Sir, this book in my hand tells me to flee from the wrath to come. Also, I fear that this burden which is upon my back will sink me lower than the grave. Therefore, I need to get rid of it." "If this is so," said Evangelist, "then why are you standing still?" "Because I don't know where to go," he answered. Then Evangelist pointed with his finger over a wide field. "Do you see yonder wicket gate?" He asked. "No," said Christian. "Then do you see a shining light?" "I think I do," said Christian. Then said Evangelist, "Keep that light in your eye and go in the direction. So shall you reach the gate. There, when you knock, So I saw in my dream that the man began to run, but he hadn't run far before his wife and children saw him running and called after him to return. But the man put his fingers in his ears and ran. Before his wife and children saw him running and called after him to return. But the man put his fingers in his ears and ran on. He didn't look back, but ran towards the middle of the field. The neighbors came out to see him run, and as he ran, some mocked and others threatened. A couple of them were resolved to fetch him back by force. The name of the one was Obstinate, and the name of the other was Pliable. Now by this time the man had gone a good distance from them. Nevertheless, they pursued after him and overtook him. "Neighbors, why have you come?" asked Christian. "To persuade you to come back with us," they said. "That can by no means be," said Christian. "You dwell in the city of destruction. Be content, good neighbors, to go along with me." "What?" said Obstinate, "and leave our friends and our comforts behind us?" "Yes, for I seek a kingdom which we may inhabit forever. Read of it, if you will, in my book." "Oh," cried Obstinate, "away with your book, Will you not go back with us? No, not I, said Christian. Pliable so far had held his peace, but now he spoke. If what Christian says is true, I intend to go with the good man. Very well then, replied Obstinate, I will go back to my own place. I'll be no companion to such fantastical fellows. With that, they parted. Obstinate went back, and Christian and Pliable went on over the plain, talking all the while. Tell me more, neighbor Christian, inquired Pliable, about the place which we're going. There are crowns of glory to be given to us, and garments shining like the sun, Christian told him. That's very pleasant. And what else? There shall be no more crying, said Christian, for the owner of the palace will wipe away all tears from our eyes. Well, my good companion, I'm glad to hear these things. Come on, let's hurry. I can't go any faster, answered Christian, with this burden on my back. What's the burden on his back? It's about to take him down, it looks like. Now I saw in my dream that as they were hurrying along and talking, they had drawn near to a quagmire in the middle of the plain, which was called the Slough of Despond, probably like water and mud and sand and swamp. And before they knew what was happening, they had both fallen into the bog. It was a bog where many travelers before them had been drowned. Here, therefore, they wallowed, being grievously bedaubed with the dirt. And Christian, because of the burden on his back, began to sink, first knee-deep, then waist-deep, into the loathsome scum. Neighbor Christian, where are you now? Asked Pliable. Truly, I do not know, Christian answered. So Pliable began to be offended and angrily said to his fellow, Is this the happiness you promised me? If we have such ill speed our first setting out, what may we expect between this and our journey's end? With that, having no burden to contend with, Pliable scrambled out on that side of the slough, which was nearest to his own house. And so he ran off home for a hot bath, leaving Christian to his fate. For his part, Christian was struggling to reach the side of the slough nearest to the wicket gate, which he eventually did, but couldn't clamber out by reason of the burden on his back. He couldn't get out because of that terrible burden. Then I beheld in my dream that a man came to him whose name was Help, and asked him what he was doing there. Christian answered, Sir, I was bidden to go this way by a man called Evangelist. But did you not look for the stepping stones? Fear swallowed me so hard that I fell in, replied Christian. That is the snare and hazard of this place, said Help. It so spews out its filth that at the changes of the weather, these steps are hardly seen. Here, give me your hand. So he gave him his hand and drew him out and set him on firm ground again. And Christian continued on his way towards the wicket gate. Now I'm going to have to put this down. This is getting long. Although he didn't know it, worse trouble lay in store, for a certain Mr. Worldly Wiseman was now seen crossing the field to meet him. He dwelt in the town of Carnal Policy, a very great town, right beside where Christian lived. This man then, sit back, Kinsley. You gotta get back to the children. He dwelt in this man having some inkling of him for Christian's departure from the city of destruction. Many people told about it. He began to ask him questions. How now, good fellow? Where are you going with that great burden? I'm going to yonder wicket gate. Have you a wife and children? Asked Mr. Worldly Wise Man. Why, yes, replied Christian, but I am so heavily weighed down, I can't take pleasure in them any more. Who counseled you to start upon this dangerous journey? A man that came to me. His name, as I remember, was Evangelist. I thought as much, said Mr. Worldly Wise Man. He is forever leading travelers astray. There's no more difficult road in the world than the one he's directed you to. I see by the dirt on you that you've already been in the slough of despond. But that slough is only the beginning of your troubles. In the way you are going, you are likely to encounter far worse things than this: lions, dragons, darkness, and death. This has been confirmed by many witnesses. So why should a man so carelessly risk his life by giving heed to a stranger? After pausing for breath, Mr. Worldly Wise Man proceeded. Hear me, I am older than you, and I'll give you some advice. In yonder village there dwells a gentleman whose name is Legality, a very judicious man, a man of very good name. He is skilled to help men off with their burdens. He has, to my knowledge, cured several who were going out of their wits because of them. His house is not a mile from this place, and if he's not home himself, his son, who's called Civility, will help you. Moreover, if you wish, there are houses standing empty in the village. At reasonable rates, you can rent a house in the village. The food is cheap and good, and you can send for your wife and family, and all live happily together. Christian, we fear, was all too ready to listen to Mr. Worldly Wise Man and leave the straight path that he was on. It was hard. Sir, which is the way to this honest man's house? He inquired. Do you see yonder high hill? Asked Mr. Worldly Wise Man. Yes, very well. By that hill you must go, and the first house you come to is Mr. Legality's. Thus did Mr. Worldly Wise Man courteously direct poor Christian down the wrong road, for what he had failed to tell him was that the hill ahead was a fearsome mountain. It seemed to overhang the road so much that Christian, looking up as the clouds scudded over it, was afraid that it would fall upon his head. Worse than that, there were flashes of fire coming out of it, and Christian, because of his burden, might easily have fallen, and thus, early on his journey, have been burned to death. Wherefore, he did sweat and quake for fear. Oh no. At that moment, who should appear but Evangelist, coming to meet him with a severe, dreadful look on his face, at the sight of which Christian began to blush with shame. Oh no. Aren't you the man I found weeping outside the city of destruction? Asked Evangelist. Yes, dear sir, I am the man. Did not I direct you to the little wicket gate? Yes, dear sir, replied Christian. How is it then that you've so quickly turned aside? I met, you see, a gentleman, Christian was saying, and he persuaded me that I might find in the village before me a man who could take off my burden. He said, moreover, he would show me a better way, not so attended with difficulties as this way, sir, that you set me in. Then said Evangelist, stand still a little. He stood trembling, and Evangelist said, you have rejected the word of God for the advice of Mr. Worldly Wise Man. But Mr. Legality cannot free you from your burden. Mr. Legality is a cheat. As for his son, Civility, notwithstanding his looks, he cannot help you either. As he spoke, there was a great clap of thunder, and Christian called himself a fool for listening to Mr. Worldly Wise. I'm sorry, I've hearkened to this man's counsel, he said, turning back with haste. He spoke to no one on the way, nor if anybody asked him, would he give them an answer. He went like one that was all the while treading on a forbidden ground, and could by no means think himself safe till he had regained the road that he had abandoned. But would he ever reach it? He wasn't at all sure, for narrow is the gate, it said in his book, and few there be that find it. I saw that in my dream. Christian, ahead on a grassy bank, lay 3 men fast asleep with fetters on their heels. They were called Simple, Sloth, and presumption. Christian knew that to sleep on this particular road was like sleeping in the rigging of a ship when a storm was brewing. "Wake up," he cried, "and I will help you off with your irons." But they only opened one eye at him and yawned. "I see no danger," said Simple. "I want to go on sleeping," said Small. "Every tub must stand on its own bottom," said Presumption. Then they all three rolled over and went to sleep again. So Christian proceeded on his way, troubled to think that men in danger should so little esteem his kindness in waking them. And we are now to learn how wise it was of Christian to warn them, for as he drew near to the narrow wicket gate, he saw that it was firmly closed. And even as he reached it, he felt the wind of an arrow swish past his ear and bury itself in the woodwork. Looking round in terror, he now saw on the opposite hill a strong castle with a host of dark, menacing figures. On the battlements, Christian didn't dally. Over the gate was written, "Knock, and it shall be open to you." Knock with all his might he did. A second arrow nearly missed him. "Who's there?" called a voice. "A poor burdened traveler come from the city of destruction, and I'm going to the celestial city." To his relief, the door was opened quickly, and a hand pulled him in. Then Christian asked the guardian of the gate, whose name was Goodwill, "What mean these arrows?" To which he answered, "Yonder castle belongs to Beelzebub, the prince of the devils. Both he and his soldiers will shoot their darts at anyone who tries to enter here. They aim to kill you before you can reach safety. You are fortunate to be alive." "I tremble and rejoice," said Christian. "Why do you come alone?" asked Goodwill. "Because none of my neighbors and none whom I encountered on the road saw the danger." "Did none of them follow you?" "Pliable came with me a little way until we fell both together into the slough of despond," Christian answered. At that he was discouraged and would not adventure further. "Alas, poor man, is it not worth running a few risks when the heavenly city is our destination?" Goodwill asked. "But I'm not one to talk," replied Christian. "I also nearly turned aside, persuaded by the arguments of Mr. Worldly Wiseman. And I don't know what would have become of me had not Evangelist met me again when I was musing in the midst of my dumps. And the truth to tell, I'm still much inconvenienced by this burden that is upon my back." Then I saw in my dream that Christian asked him if he could help him off with his burden. "However hard I try," said Christian, I can't even move it. He couldn't take it off." "No man can get it off of you," said Goodwill, "but keep straight to the narrow path, and it will lead you to the place of deliverance." So Christian began to gird his loins and to address himself to his journey. "How far will it be?" he asked himself as he plodded on the way. His next stop was the house of the interpreter, who Goodwill had told him could give him useful lessons for his journey. It was a large, mysterious house, which is one visits in dreams. Its master, in answer to his knock, asked him what he wanted. "Sir," said Christian, "I am a man that is going to Mount Zion, and I was told that if I called here, you would show me excellent things which would help me." "Come in," said the interpreter. First he led him into a parlor, which was full of dust because it was never swept. So the interpreter called for a serving maid to sweep it. And as she swept, the dust began to fly. And Christian began to choke. Never had there been such dust. Oh, he reached around blindly. Then he heard the interpreter tell the maid, "Bring hither water and sprinkle the room." All at once the dust had cleared, and the maid was sweeping up with pleasure. "This parlor," said the interpreter, "is the soul of man, clogged with the dust of sin. But see how easily God's grace, it can be cleansed." I saw in my dream that the interpreter took Christian by the hand again and led him into a very dark room where there sat a man in an iron cage. Now the man seemed very sad. He sat with his eyes looking down to the ground and his hands folded together, and he sighed as if his heart would break. Then said Christian, "Who is this?" "Talk with him and see," said the interpreter. "What used you to be?" asked Christian. "I was once a flourishing professor, both in my own eyes and also in the eyes of others," answered the man. "I was on my way, as I thought, to the celestial city, and I was confident that I would get there." "But what did you do to bring yourself to this condition?" Christian asked. "I failed to keep watch," the man replied. "I followed the pleasures of this world, which promised me all manner of delights, but they proved to be an empty bubble, and now I am shut up in this iron cage, a man of despair who can't get out." No further explanations were given. No one said who put him there, but the interpreter who whispered to Christian, "Bear well in mind what you have seen." Finally, Christian was led to a gateway like the one which he had lately entered. Beside it sat a man at a table with a book and an inkhorn before him to take the name of anyone who wished to pass through. But the gate was guarded by fierce men in armor, ready to do what hurt and mischief they could to any traveler. And though there stood a great company of people desirous of going in, they didn't dare. Then, as it were seen upon a stage, Christian saw a valiant man approach. "Set down my name, sir," he said. That done, he drew his sword and rushed upon the armed men, who laid upon him with deadly force. But the man, not at all discouraged, fell to cutting and hacking most resolutely. So, after he had received many wounds, he cut his way to safety. "I think I know the lesson of this," said Christian triumphantly as he resumed his journey. "My safety will depend not on cleverness, but simply on courage." Oh, how his burden on his back in the first place, and why nobody else has burdens, as happens in dreams, we are not told. But never had he been so eager as he was now to be rid of it. It had bothered him so terribly, and that, did he but know it, was half the battle, getting rid of his burden. Now I saw in my dream that the road from then was fenced on either side with a wall. The wall was named Salvation. He's about to put on another piece of armor. Along this road did burdened Christian run, or should we say he did his best to run so far as he could with that load upon his back. At the foot of a hill, he passed an open tomb, then up again. Upon a little knoll he found himself beneath a wayside cross, and as its shadow fell across him, so suddenly the burden, slipping from his shoulders, fell from his back. It tumbled down the hill, it tumbled into the mouth of the tomb, and it was never seen again. Christian kept feeling behind his back. He couldn't believe it, for it was very surprising to him that a simple act of gazing upon the cross had set him free, and his burden of guilt was gone. As he stood there in amazement, behold, 3 shining ones appeared to him. The first one said, "Your soul is now swept clean of sin." The second stripped him of his mud-stained rags and gave him new bright clothes. The third one handed him a parchment. "Guard it carefully," he said, "and surrender it only when you have reached the gate of the celestial city." Great dangers lay ahead of him, but for the moment he was light as air. So Christian gave 3 leaps for joy and went on singing. "Who would true valor see? Let him come hither. One here will constant be. Come wind, come weather, there's no discouragement shall make him once relent his first avowed intent to be a hope." What's going to happen now? I don't think he's going to have an easy road.
Subscribe, leave a comment, like, and share. Thanks for support. Please show your support for this video by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and pushing the bell notification to get new notifications whenever I post a video. Thanks for your support.